Welcome to today's Lunch and Learn webinar. Start your budgeting season off right with a smart budget for Microsoft Dynamics NAV, brought to you by ArcherPoint and Centage. It is time to move beyond spreadsheets and formulas. It is time to move beyond dreading budget season. Budget Maestro by Centage is an easy-to-use, scalable, cloud-based budgeting and forecasting solution that eliminates the time-consuming and error-prone activities associated with using spreadsheets. Its built-in financial and business logic allows users to quickly create and update their budgets and forecasts and never worry about formulas, functions, links, or any custom programming. It is the only solution in the market that offers synchronized P&L, balance sheet, and automatically generated cash flow reporting. Budget Maestro serves more than 9,000 users worldwide. Our speaker today is Matt Pope. Matt Pope has been with Centage for nearly 15 years and currently manages the solution engineer team. He lives in Marlborough, Mass. With his wife and daughter and is an avid New England sports fan. In today's webinar, Matt will demonstrate how easy it is to use Budget Maestro to create a smart budget for Microsoft Dynamics NAV. So let's get started. Matt, over to you.
All right. Thank you. So today we're going to give you an introduction to our solution, and hopefully it looks like it could be something that's going to really help you all out. Obviously we're going to be happy to get more one-on-one and get a lot deeper as well. But let me show you a little bit about what we're talking about. As we move into our solution here, what we're trying to solve is the immediate challenges that people have with the budgeting process, and I can sum it up into three key things. The first is getting access to your data, right? You got to be able to get access to your data. We spend a ton of time dumping data out of a system. Then we have to remold it and provide it to people in a way that they can start giving us input, analyze the information, and provide some feedback. It's a challenge just to get the data, then put it into formats that people can work with, and then hold that structure so everything rolls up and still makes sense to everybody, let alone the live process of making changes and making decisions. So as we bring us into our solution, we are very proud about the fact that our solution has always been extremely powerful and always been offering different ways of accessing the solution system, whether it's been on-premise or cloud is the most popular approach, accessing through the cloud. But our latest update has started to take advantage of the most modern technologies: HTML5, Mongo, ASW, Amazon Web Services, AWS, I guess. So it's made things very easy to just come right to our website and just sign right into the solution. But as I mentioned, it starts with getting access to your data, okay? And so when we talk about our solution, our simple interface, breaks things down into four simple areas. Most general users, might just, work primarily in Budget Maestro, that core aspect of the solution where you make all your decisions. And we're going to spend a ton of time in there today. But where we're going to start is this data modeler, accessing your information, okay? Now, there is an administrative area that I'll point out, at least for one key feature and benefit that you'll gain as we flow through the process, getting our data, some administrative options, making decisions, building out your model, and then, reporting, analyzing that information. But if we start here, this is where we simply connect to your system. At a minimum, you're going to be talking about connecting to your general ledger. Now, Dynamics Navision, all the dynamic systems, no general ledger we can't integrate with. I just happen to have a couple sample databases for certain systems on my machine today. I'm connecting to a more generic database today because none of the sample databases any of those systems ever provide have enough data to actually play with. So as we connect, though, what I can't stress enough is, you're not talking about weeks of scoping and for us to build a model for you, then to have to map that to your structure. This connection is automatically going to recognize your structure, your dimensions, and we're going to make that the structure of our system. It automatically turns all the dimensions from your system, your account numbers, your departments, whatever dimensions you have are going to become dimensions in our system. So there's no mapping that has to take place. But we then allow you to manage it further, organize how you want to view your organization from a reporting standpoint or just in the budgeting process. So when it comes to departments, for example, you might want to roll up your organization, perhaps from a corporate perspective, and it's all just simple drag and drop if you wanted to reorganize things. Okay, this built-in intelligence allows you to easily roll things up how you like to. You're not restricted to the one approach. If you're a multi-company organization, you might be more used to viewing the organization maybe in a multi-company way, with eliminations. So we are unique in how we can handle multiple charts of accounts, still handle the consolidation of those charts, handling eliminations, including even multi-currency challenges that you may have today. But it doesn't just stop with simple organizational structure or rolling up products or projects or customers by region and things like that. But the financial power you're going to see in the solution in just a moment also makes it so when you talk about simple financial statements, income statement, balance sheet, that sort of thing, it's just as easy. It's hard to believe, but if we look at just a simple income statement here, it's just as easy to just drag and drop your account groups, your accounts anywhere on the report you want. You'll see examples of this as we get further into the data, but Budget Maestro knows what your accounts are. It knows if they're cash accounts, receivable accounts, revenue, expenses, and so forth. It knows how to treat them debit and credit-wise. So you could just drag and drop things, not creating ranges of accounts, programming how you want to roll up the information, and you'll see the ease of working with this data once we roll it out and start using it for reporting and budgeting purposes. So to summarize this first point, with our connectors, you'll easily be able to connect, manage, and mold your structure the way you're going to want to use it in budgeting and reporting, and we roll that out to do that. So let's take a look about what I'm talking about. That's what will come into Budget Maestro and start making all these business decisions that really where people spend the majority of their time. We do have security built in, for example, so most users may not even worry about these areas. They'll just see Budget Maestro and run some reports. Before we do that, I want to walk you through the flow. One more step. As we grab your actuals, as we grab all those dimensions from your system, it's not just for running variance reporting later against your budget. It's also about making it easy to get started. We call this the quick start. What this allows you to do is automatically build a budget, a strawman budget, right off your actuals from last year. Some people like that approach, just as a baseline. Think about the process of getting all the data out of your system today, then creating all these templates that you have to send to people, okay, with all the line items that they had spending for last year, just so they can have that visibility and then make changes. This automatically creates that. It takes all last year's expenses by all those dimensions, all your revenue streams, automatically creates the line items in your budget. I'm going to show you an example of what that means and what that looks like. But just to give an example, I did this for a client a few weeks ago, and in less than 3 seconds, it created 3,000 lines of budgetary data based on last year's figures. It's not good enough for a finished budget because you're going to want to make adjustments and make true business decisions. And so that brings us to the core area where most people will spend their time, Budget Maestro. Now, what we're looking at on the screen here are just a couple of examples of the most common areas that people contribute to their budget, right? Operating expenses, revenue, personnel, just to name a few. Again, just showing how security comes into play again. There's other options in here too, but for example, some people may not have access to personnel. They won't even see that here. You can navigate through these tiles. You can also just work along the side. But let's jump into some of the data so you can see what a budget actually looks like, because we've seen a couple of cool windows, but outside of a couple of pretty windows, I haven't seen any budget yet. So if we jump into operating expenses, what you'll notice here is where most people will spend their time doing their data entry. Now, I closed a couple windows. Most people will come in here. This is how they like to work. I'm going to reopen those and show you what they're all about in a moment. What I want you to notice is I have a list of expenses here, all tied to an account number. They're also tied to your other dimensions. I just happen to be filtering on a particular department, filtering on a particular product. In this case, things not associated with a product or a project. But for example, I'm seeing everything not associated with a project in this department. But if I want to see everything in this department regardless, I could just drag that over here. Now I've got items, for project B, project A. Just as an example, you'll have different dimensions how you like to work. If I want to filter on and just look at project B, I can bring that back over into my filters. Now I'm focused only on project B, only administration. But I got some better examples that aren't tied to projects here. Now, You get very creative with all these dimensions. We can obviously have multiple versions of the budget, best case scenario, worst case scenario, change all the cool things I'm about to show you as we walk through here. You can plug in bulk amounts, spread them across the year. We have a number of spread methods built in. You can also create your own seasonalities. Okay, but it's more than just plugging in annual amounts and spreading them or plugging in monthly numbers. Oftentimes, people have variable costs, variable expenses. Let's look at a basic example I have here, office rental. I didn't plug this in. This is actually being calculated. If we look down below, I have this details section that's showing me it's actually based on square footage times a rate. So what I want to get across here is that you are going to be able to load non-financials, metrics, ratios, whatever you need in the budgeting and planning process, you'll be able to have in here. This is a very basic example, but depending on the industry, manufacturing we'll talk about on the revenue side, how we'll have units times a rate. Hours in the service industry, you have hours as well, billable hours, utilized hours, healthcare, patient days, beds, whatever metrics and ratios, whatever KPIs are important to your business, you can be able to have in here and drive the budget. Okay. Now, one of the other things that people don't think about in the budgeting planning process is the balance sheet and cash flow as well. We find that more than 50% of people don't consider projecting balance sheet and cash flow today. Not because they don't want it, but the P&L is just hard enough. So I do want to touch upon this briefly. It's a major strength of our solution. It has been as long as we've been in business. We automate balance sheet and cash flow. So you just budget the P&L with no extra effort. We're automating these debits and credits. You'll notice on this expense, I've got a debit to my account. It's feeding through payables, hitting cash. Let me make this a little bit more clear. Even budgeting below the GL, I have a liability insurance account here, casualty and vehicle. My casualty line, you'll see, is on a cash basis. But my vehicle insurance in that same account string is on a 30-day basis. Okay, we automate that for you. Now, you're going to obviously be able to set defaults, not even worrying about that. Most users won't. Most users just want to come in here, plug in the expenses that they have to worry about. And finance is happy that everything's enforcing the structure they require for reporting purposes, and you're getting a balance sheet and cash flow projection. So you're going to set defaults in most cases, but when you have a big enough expense, maybe like legal fees, maybe legal fees, you're prepaying it, going out of my cash while I recognize it over the course of the year. Or something like general building repairs, where we might accrue it, pay it out quarterly. If you have a big enough expense, a big enough revenue stream that's going to impact the bottom line, and there's an exception to the rule, you will be able to customize it. And to that point, I do want to reiterate the customization of how you work in these windows. The data you see differs depending on each user's responsibility and business to business. So when we just talked about the payment methods, if you wanted to, all the properties to my items are over here. I got notes fields and things like that. If I did want to define the payment method line by line, I could just add that to my screen. But like I said, most times users aren't worried about that. You can have that set up default and behind the scenes. Those are a couple basics I like to point out. We'll see how this feeds through the rest of the tool pretty quickly. I'll also point out, the time periods, right? If you want to look at this quarterly, or, if I have a multi-year forecast, Budget Maestro goes out as far as you want. Up to 6 months ago, we only forecasted out 60 years, which was already more than anybody needed. But with the latest update, we decided to just pull away that restriction. So if I want to work on multiple years at a time, or when you talk about a mid-year forecast, you'll be able to splice your actuals mid-year with the budget. So I could see maybe 6 months of actuals in the remaining budget. But what if I don't even care about the actuals? I just want to only focus on July to June while I'm plugging in my numbers. Well, you're going to be able to look at the time periods however you like. If I want to work July to June, I can have that. So there's just a lot of flexibility in how you work in the data. Now, as we go over to the revenue section, a lot of this is consistent, right? I can plug in annual amounts, spread them, monthly amounts. For those of you who might have any deferred revenue, I'll quickly highlight one more thing on the balance sheet and cash flow. You'll notice here that I'm booking $4.8 million in period 1, but that's all going to deferred revenue. While we receive the cash in 30 days, I'm recognizing it evenly over the course of the year. I don't think we see that. We don't see it much with things like manufacturing or distribution. Professional services, sometimes if you have a contract agreement, you have to recognize the service over a period of time. This can come in really handy. The waterfall effects go away. You don't have to worry about that anymore. But let's stick to the basics for the moment. You'll notice this 6,000 spread evenly is 5,000 a month. Well, how does that work? Well, that works because this 6,000 isn't a dollar amount. This is a unit. 6,000 units times the price, giving me my revenue every month. Let me paint that picture a little clearer. If you did have different ways that you budget your revenue streams, for example, that makes it a little easier to understand. But if everything's in units or everything's in cash, I don't need that. And I could have my price line on here. Oops, come on, the item that has a price. I could put my price in here, units times a price, right? Now, when you have large amounts, large volumes of information, you start budgeting revenue by customer and product and so forth. You'll remember I've got those dimensions in here too. So let me bring my customers in. Let me bring my product in. And you know what? The examples I want to show you are in my sales department. So let's come down to my sales department here. I got a ton of revenue streams here, all going to the same account for different customers, different products. Okay, and I've got my amounts spread evenly. So I got this big grid. Now down below, I can see what I showed you before with my square footage. I've got number of units and a price and things like that. But what if I just want to focus on one thing at a time? I've got this grid of revenue amounts. What if I want to work on just units across all these items? Well, I can change my perspective. I'll look at the unit perspective, right? Or if I want to look at my pricing grid, I can just work on the prices. So we're providing a lot more flexibility in how you look at the information and slice and dice the information, not just in reporting. You'll see this all again carries through to reporting for full flexibility in reports. We want people to have the same kind of flexibility while they're working in the data, being able to look at things from different perspectives. Okay. Now, the last piece I'll highlight when it comes to the core areas of the budgeting process, because there's all kinds of extra sophistication built in here. We could put a unit cost per unit. We could build up the cost based on material, labor, overhead, things like that. So that's all more for the one-on-ones where we can really talk about your specific needs. But personnel is a common challenge across the board. So we allow you to budget by individual or position. Right? If we just look at this individual, you can see just what's happening. I've got a start date. I've got an hourly wage. If we look down below, because there's a lot that's going on, I actually was able to define what benefits and taxes this person gets. You're able to manage these all at a global level, and then they just feed down to whoever has what. So these are just examples. Some people will start doing single plus one, family, things like that. So you can get very specific with it. But if we look down below, you'll get a gist of, just what our power is all about. You'll notice on the wages, we're prorating it based on that start date. We're handling caps on things like Social Security, waiting periods on things like health insurance or my 401k. Again, we get clients worldwide who can handle any benefit and tax that you may require. And this all flows through to the balance sheet and the cash flow. You do not get a more accurate payroll budget than a Budget Maestro, let alone all the same detail and accuracy flows all the way through. All right. Same thing with the grid though, like on revenue here, I can work in the grid as head count. I got my staffer, 10 heads a month kind of thing. I could work by hours, all kinds of different ways you can work in the information. We just want you to be comfortable. All right. We talked about a number of the factors and metrics that might be involved in any of these line items, but I do want to point out that's what the drivers section is. Same as these other areas, you could have a grid like an assumptions page where maybe all you do is plug in those metrics and just know they're going to feed out to all those other areas of the tool. And I did point out how you have different versions, right? And you can do all these same things across your versions. When you don't want to go line by line and make increases and decreases here and there, that's what this what if tool is all about, allowing you to make mass assumptions across the board. You want to increase all expenses by 10% for certain departments, or increase the price of product across certain revenue streams, maybe for certain regions of customers. That's up to you. You can make those mass assumptions with here, but it's a whole new version that you can run comparisons against. So one more thing, I'm going to back up for a moment. I didn't highlight this because I really like it. When you consider how many people you could bring into this tool with how simple and easy it is to just plug in your data and maneuver, with more people comes you need to know you can manage those people. So I do want to point out that you are going to be able to have, workflow and understand where the process stands. While you'll obviously be able to submit a whole department at a time or a project at a time, I do want to point out that we've taken workflow to another level where you could literally submit and approve and reject things line by line if you wanted to. I don't see this in a ton of places, but every once in a while we see people want that ability. Maybe when you talk about personnel hiring or capital purchases and things like that. And that's going to be useful when we get over to reporting, because it's not just about a control, it's about having visibility. So when we get to our reports, you'll be able to have tons of shared reports. You'll have only your reports, and you'll be able to even mark your favorites. Matter of fact, that's what I'm seeing on the screen here, just tiles straight to my favorite reports. What I'd like to point out first is you'll notice I didn't have to run a report. The reports just always exist. When you're making changes, they just update. The idea of having to go run a report and wait an hour has gone away. The reports are constantly updating. They're always there at your fingertips. Here's a sample of an income statement. Again, how you roll up your structure is up to you. But if I want to look at this quarterly, well, I could have a quarterly one or a consolidating one with my structure across the top. I could click on these and show you them, but I want to show you how easy it was. I could just change this one to quarterly. Or maybe change it to a consolidating report with my structure going across the top. So I'll just drag that, make that my columns instead. And I'll pick the particular hierarchy I want to run that report on. So I got my sales rolling up to operations, finance, administration rolling up to corporate. This might be multiple companies with eliminations rolling up to a consolidated level. That's all up to you. But it's not just about financial statements, right? It's about, the revenue streams, maybe when you want to use those customers down the side and products across the top, or you want to just flip that around, analyze it a different way. Maybe add the time dimension to that perspective, stack it. I could look at that quarterly like I did the other report. It's that easy. Matter of fact, I don't even have to keep this open, so we can really make the screen nice and clean. One more report that's always a fan favorite. I talked about the workflow, the management. Well, reporting on that data is just as key, right? So I might want to have an expense approval summary. So by department, I can see total expenses in that department, how much has been started, how much is in progress, submitted, approved. And by the way, these stages are all defined by you as well. Okay? Or maybe see that by expense down the side, by department, by stage. So you get tons of flexibility. These are just examples for today. The last thing I'll point out to wrap this up is that, as much as people love these reports, there is a need for dashboarding and charts and graphs and things like that. And this I'll just tease as well for the moment. But this is all just pulling the information straight from Budget Maestro. Yes, we're in Excel at the moment, but it's not Excel reporting. I'll bring the formula bar in to prove it. We don't need it, so I hide it. But you'll see here, no links to formulas. All right. The idea is I could have run this variance report right out of Budget Maestro, exported it to Excel, and built all this on top of it. But I don't want to have to do that every time. I just build the report in here. It automatically updates. The fear of being in Excel is typing over something, so let's get that out of the way. Or deleting something by accident. That always happens. I just come up here, I hit refresh, and it updates. It fixes it. You can't break these reports. It's still dynamic, using your dimensions from the system. Filter, it looks static, yet I just double click. I get my organizational views, those hierarchies, maybe filter on corporate, hit OK, everything updates. It's all at your fingertips. You're going to be able to have whatever reports looking the way you want, your charts, your graphs, your formatting, KPIs, the balance sheet, the cash flow, it's all flowing through because of that debit and credit logic. Forecasting, T reports, it's up to you on what you're going to want out of your reporting. The best of all, this is like a report book. We even have a distribution feature we added. So if you have to send these static reports to people on a regular basis, you just hit a button. You've already defined a list of people and which reports they get. That was a huge addition last year. So that's kind of the presentation. I know it was a lot and it was quick. Hopefully a lot of that rung true for a lot of you. And we're happy to dig a little bit deeper and talk a little bit more one-on-one. Perhaps it's a good time to address some questions.
Great. Thanks so much, Matt. We do have a couple questions today. And again, if you have questions, please type them in the questions pane of your GoToWebinar console. First up is someone would like to know, how is it licensed?
The licensing is user-based. So whoever you want to have access to the system would require a license.
And how long does it take to implement Budget Maestro?
Well, it's pretty quick because we take one of the core amounts of time out of the equation compared to most systems. Most systems, they have a lot of algorithms, they have a lot of things pre-built, but at the end of the day, they spend weeks scoping out what you need. They build a model for you. What we're trying to show you with our tools, all these capabilities are already built in. If you want to budget your organization one way, great. Tomorrow, when you want to do something a little different, you're going to have the flexibility to do so because all the capabilities are already built in. We didn't build just one model for you. It's the idea of Excel. And Excel, the model you built was built over years and years and years, but it was still built a certain way. Can you change a couple numbers and see them flow through? Sure. And that's what most tools will give you, that flexibility in a safer environment. But our tool is going to give you the ability that when you found yourself in those positions where no matter how much you change those variables, it didn't work out, you didn't get the bottom line you wanted, and you had to try something new, that's when you felt like you had to rebuild the whole thing from scratch. All right, that's what we're providing you. You can just create a copy of that version and all the power of the tool. You can change how you pay vendors. You could change how you drive your business based on different factors instead of breaking all those links and formulas that you had before. So I didn't finish answering the question. I apologize.
It's okay.
So so it comes down to just the system's already built. We just have to load your structure, your chart of accounts, and so forth. And that, most times we're doing that just through the integration anyway. So we're just going to pull that in. That doesn't take more than a week, and that's mostly because of back and forth phone calls with you. Nobody knows your accounts better than you do. And then we start the training process. Once we load your structure in, we could build the budget right off your actuals in a matter of minutes, and then you start training and figuring out how you want to model your business over that period of time. That's usually, most people are taking advantage of the face-to-face approach, which is usually like 4 calendar days. So by the end of that, a lot of our clients have the first pass of their budget completed. And then they might start running scenarios and things like that. So you're only talking about a couple weeks of real time, but it depends on how you spread it out based on your other priorities.
Got it. Thanks so much. Next, can you restrict what users can see? I think you addressed this, but you could just reiterate.
Whether it's from a system perspective or any of your dimensions. So if people should only have access to certain accounts or departments or projects or areas of the system, right? Some people don't have access to personnel. It could really come down to somebody could log in and only have access to that driver's section, just an assumptions page where they put in some metrics and that's all they're responsible for. There's a ton of security built in that respect.
And then our last question today, we have 5 companies. Can we do a consolidated roll-up?
Yes. So I hinted an example of at least how you'd roll up the organization structurally, where I had the multiple companies rolling up to a consolidated level. Like a general ledger, if you had 5 companies in one general ledger, it would recommend you create at least one eliminations company. So we'd add that elimination entity in our tool as well. We take the same approach as the GL. The difference is we can hold multiple charts as well. So each company's individual charts would all be in our system, and we can consolidate those into more of a master reporting roll-up as well, because we have that ability. Most systems will require you to come up with a master, and they'll just map all your individual charts to it. The problem is that's good for consolidated reporting, but it's not good for budgeting. Your users are going to want to work with their chart in the budgeting tool. So we bring them all in and give you the best of both worlds. Work with the charts they're familiar with, but still have that consolidated mapping inside the system. And the last piece to that, if you had multi-currency, as I was hinting at before, we do have currency tables. We can handle, month-end rates, month average rates, spot rates. So we'll even calculate the translation adjustments for you, which is just an added bonus on the consolidation side, irregardless of budgeting and planning.
Excellent. So glad. I hope that answers everyone's questions. I know we're out of time today. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. We hope you consider it time well spent. Please help us offer value by taking a few more minutes and give us your feedback and suggestions for future topics for our Lunch and Learn webinars. Just email your comments to info@archerpoint.com. Again, thank you everyone for your time. Thank you, Matt. This concludes today's session. Have a great rest of your day.